Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, IDP edition. I'm John Macri, and I will be going over the top IDP takeaways from Week 14, which was part two of the bye-pocalypse now with 6 teams on bye, and it was an absolute doozy this week because there were plenty of injuries all over the place to take basically even more away from the already thin amount of options we had to choose from this week. So we're going to look at a lot of those situations here in our IDP takeaways this week, a couple DBs, some edges as well. But a lot of linebacker situations that were interesting this week. So we'll get into it. But as always, if there are some situations or players or whatever that you want to hear more about that I don't cover in here, you could always shout them out in the comments on YouTube, and I'll do my best to highlight them there in some way. Otherwise, these are going to be our top IDP takeaways from this week, and everything else will basically be included in the IDP fantasy report, which will be out on Tuesday around noon Eastern time. That'll have all your snap counts, data, notes, waiver wire targets for the entire week, all that stuff. And you could get access to it with a PFF Plus subscription. So, I've titled this episode, Where Have All the Starters Gone? Because not only do we have 6 teams on a bye, like I said, but we also had a ridiculous amount of injuries to starters and even to some of the backups, leaving us with just like an insane hodgepodge of IDP options to piece together to see if there's any value we can squeeze out of these next men up. So we have to start with the Tennessee Titans, where we got a rare situation where both starting linebackers, Kenneth Murray and Jerome Baker, were out for this game. So who stepped up? But Luke Gifford, of course. He wore the green dot and played every snap, while Otis Reese the fourth, can't forget the fourth on there. Otis Reese the fourth operated as the LB2. So both guys played full-time roles, so that was nice to see. If you were able to, get in there on waivers and add one of them as a replacement option this week. The question is going to be, I guess, is can these guys be useful going forward? There's at least a chance that either one of either Kenneth Murray or Jerome Baker misses again next week. Possibly both again, which would give us the option of both guys for next week as well, if needed. But if only one of them is back, either Murray or Jerome Baker, then it looks like Luke Gifford would be the LB2 to kind of prioritize if we're in need. The nice thing about this is that the Titans have been pretty consistent in deploying 2 full-time linebackers this season. So even when their options are, like you can see, Luke Gifford and Otis Reese the fourth, they'll play these guys for every single snap. So that's been really nice for us for IDP purposes. So we've been at least getting a solid option, if we have to go to Luke Gifford or Otis Reese again next week. And if we're in a spot where maybe we've been relying on like some non 100% snap linebackers in your lineup, one of these guys who should be very widely available could be an option for you this week. So keep an eye on the injury report, see how things kind of shake out regarding Kenneth Murray and Jerome Baker. I'll be sure to cover it in the preview show as well. We usually record it Wednesday night, so we'll see what happens as far as the Wednesday injury report goes. It's not a guarantee that we'll have clear information there, but as always, we will cover it as best we can. The other missing starter for the linebacker group this week was for the New York Giants this time, and it was Bobby Okereke who was out for this game, which meant that Micah McFadden moved into a full-time linebacker role and played 100% of the defensive snaps for the first time in his NFL career. Micah McFadden has essentially always been the bridesmaid, never the bride here in the NFL, but he had his chance this week with Bobby O out, and he had a solid game high 11 total tackles from him. That was nice to see. Meanwhile, Darius Muasau worked as the LB2 in more of that part-time role, which was essentially what McFadden was doing every other week, and playing around about 76.5% of the defensive snaps. And he found his way to 8 total tackles as well. So not bad there. Muasau was an option for us way back in like weeks 1 or 2. I can't remember, but when McFadden was out, and same kind of thing here. Like if Okereke misses more time, McFadden is the clear priority, but just based on playing time, and then would be in a nice spot for tackles as well. But Moasso for those deeper leagues, but only if Bobby Okereke misses time. As far as McFadden goes, should be, again, he's a deep league option most weeks, but obviously if Okereke misses more time, then he becomes a little bit more viable in more league formats. I believe he gets at least one decent matchup next week versus the Ravens, I think it is. So could be some value there in week 15 if Okereke is out again. All right, and then the other linebacker injury situation that eliminated a starting option for us was in Tampa Bay, where KJ Britt was out. We had a feeling that he wasn't going to play, but then JJ Russell, who was the kind of presumed replacement, also got injured, I think in practice this week, which kept him from suiting up for this game. So that put Vi Jones, whatever it is, VI, in for KJ Britt and JJ Russell as the LB2, which wasn't a full-time role, as we kind of expect from this group. About 60% of the snaps there for Vi Jones. Nothing to get overly excited about here. Plus, we could probably assume that either one of KJ Britt or JJ Russell will be back. Which, because Jones again wasn't a full-time role already, he'd probably be near the bottom of waiver wire priorities as far as these options go, and only for deeper leagues. The odds are against him. Like I said, JJ Russell or KJ Britt could very well be back next week, and then it just eliminates his viability completely. So just a name if the injuries kind of continue there for Tampa Bay. Okay, let's look at the 49ers now, because this was a group I went into more detail on during the preview show this week, taking a look at kind of Fred Warner's production and grades, like pre and post injury. And he had another really inefficient game this week with just 3 total tackles, I believe it was. Now, last week, Warner was in and out of the game with what they were calling like cramps, but I wouldn't be surprised if it had to do with that fractured ankle that he's playing on. But anyways, this week he did play a full complement of snaps right up until garbage time, where he left the game late. That's why you see 87% snap share there. He ceded the rest of his snaps to Jalen Graham, I believe it was. But again, just another really kind of poor game for Fred Warner as far as IDP production. It wasn't a great matchup for tackles in the first place, and the Bears really didn't create many opportunities for him with their offense. So there will definitely hopefully be better games than this, because we certainly expect more than 3 tackles from Warner. Anyways, the other linebacker spot was Devondre Campbell again, though he left this game before garbage time, which I thought was interesting. This was something we talked about in the preview show as well this week, as how he'd been rotating a bit with D. Winters in the game last week. This week, his day was done at some point in the third quarter, and Winters played the rest of the way. So it's going to be, I think, pretty hard to trust Campbell, even though he led the team in tackles this week. That usage has been really inconsistent over these past couple weeks, and something that we're going to try to avoid during the fantasy playoffs, since there's also a chance that Dre Greenlaw gets back in there at some point as well. So for now, Campbell is going to be kind of one of our red flags heading into next week. All right, I wanted to highlight the Falcons linebackers again because of Troy Anderson and Nate Landman's usage. I highlighted them last week in Anderson's return, and the usage was similar from the week 1 game with both guys active, where Landman played on early downs, Anderson played on later downs. But this week was actually quite a bit different. What we got more closely resembled like your traditional rotation, where these guys actually took turns rotating drives instead of that early down, late down deployment, situation specific deployment, I guess, from those previous weeks when they were both healthy. Ultimately, it's still just going to be a duo to avoid. Caden Ellis, we could continue to rock with no problem. He played 100%, had a really nice game, got a sack as well, but we're just not trusting Anderson or Landman outside of the deepest leagues. Like Anderson still finished with 48%, Landman finished with 33%. So, especially with bye weeks done now, we should be able to find some more trustworthy options in week 15 and beyond. Okay, weekly Jacksonville Jaguars linebacker update, because Foye Oluokun has been getting some unideal usage, obviously, since returning from IR. We've covered that before, where he's getting more work on the defensive line and rushing the passer, while also still occasionally rotating off the field. But this week, not too bad, actually. Just 4 of his 64 snaps were spent on the defensive line, at least according to our initial run of data. And just 4 of those snaps spent rushing the passer as well. And he played every snap this week, so that was really nice as well. And guess what? He had a team-leading 11 total tackles for a nicely productive game. Imagine that. So nice to see that from Foye Oluokun. Hopefully that means that defensive line usage is kind of starting to go away. I remember the first few weeks, there was weeks where he was spending like 22 snaps or something like that on the edge. This week, just the 4. So it's been trending down, which has been nice to see. And that could be a nice sign for him in the fantasy playoffs here if he continues in just that typical off-ball linebacker role. Devin Lloyd, meanwhile, his usage hasn't really changed. He was still just around that 3/4 of snaps range, 76.5% for him. Only the 1 solo, 7 assists for Devin Lloyd. He'll have better games, but still more just of a deep league option only. Okay, another weekly scheduled check-in. This time it's the Los Angeles Rams linebackers, led by the new Kingleton 2.0, aka Princeton, Christian Roseboom, who delivered a really nice tackle rate again this week, considering the snap share. 8 total tackles, led the team, doing so on just 48 snaps, so close to like a 17% tackle rate, which is something that we would expect like an overly efficient linebacker like Roseboom to do if he's going to keep that Princeton nickname, right? But really the concern here that limits him is just the overall snaps, right? Because while he's making tackles at a great rate when he's on the field, he's still coming off the field at a higher rate than we trust in most leagues, which is why, a 16 or 17% tackle rate only results in like 8 total tackles. So it was 80% of snaps for Christian Roseboom this week, just 60% of snaps for Omar Spates. They'll continue to kind of be deeper league options until something changes there. Sticking with the LA teams, we'll look at the Chargers here, coming off of Sunday Night Football, where Junior Colson was also coming off injured reserve. He was active for this game, and Denzel Perriman was out once again. So it was Diane Henley, Troy Dye, and Junior Colson as the Chargers linebackers this week. Henley continued in his usual full-time role as our top linebacker to roster for IDP purposes, continued to have a nicely productive game. He did a nice job this week as well. Meanwhile, Troy Dye ended up playing just under 50% of the snaps as the LB2, and Junior Colson seemingly being eased back into action. He only saw the field for 13 snaps, so just under 20% of the defensive snaps. So really not much work at all for like the secondary linebacker options for the Chargers. He did a fine job filling in last week with Colson out, but now with Colson back in the mix, that was bound to change here, and it really just cut his value down in a big way. So I'd be fine moving on from Troy Dye at this point if you've been holding him, because there's also the chance that Denzel Perriman comes back next week as well, which likely just eliminates Dye completely from starting consideration. In Miami, Anthony Walker missed last week due to a hamstring injury, but he was able to practice this week, which got him back in the lineup here. That return ended up meaning that Tyrell Dodson got downgraded to the LB3 in the pecking order. Dodson only ended up playing like 6 snaps, and it was all in kind of one stretch where Walker appeared to maybe re-injure his hammy, but he was able to get back in the game and finish off the rest of the way. So this usage is probably our best and most trustworthy indication that Tyrell Dodson is not going to overtake a full-time starting role. Anthony Walker is their starter, and that doesn't appear to be changing for now. I'll continue to follow it, going to mostly assume, though, that this is Jordan Brooks and Anthony Walker as the full-time options the rest of the way. Yeah, obviously a nice value boost or value hold, I guess, for Anthony Walker, depending on how you were treating him. And then Tyrell Dodson, probably droppable in most formats right now. Okay, the Jets safeties. I feel like I have to talk about this because this is one of the most disgusting deployments of just like an entire stable of players to fill the void. Like this feels like the DB equivalent of throwing a bunch of shit at the wall to see what sticks, because the Jets have 5 safeties that they're throwing out there in these last 2 games. None of them are playing a full-time role. I highlighted this as a group to avoid in the preview show, but I want to make sure I hammer the point home here because, again, in case anyone missed it or, you end up putting one of these guys in your lineup, we should not be trusting them heading into the fantasy playoffs, including Chuck Clark, who did lead the way, but it was 81% of snaps. This is not what we want for our safeties. There are a lot of 100% snap safeties out there. Most teams have 2 of them. Grab one of them if you're desperate, but I'll be avoiding this group. So just to recap what they look like, Chuck Clark played 81%, 68% for Jalen Mills, 51% for Tony Adams, 31% for Isaiah Oliver, and 24% for Ashton Davis. So just want to make sure no one is relying on these guys next week because this usage, it sucks. So yeah. And then, by the way, the Jets linebackers, I should probably mention them for those wondering what the hell was going on with the linebackers for the Jets, because both Jamie and Sherwood and Quincy Williams played all but 1 snap each. But Sherwood was just a tackle vacuum this week, man. Like he was 18 total tackles for Sherwood, just 2 for Quincy Williams. That is an insane imbalance that I don't know what to tell you, but that's just a really weird outcome here. There wasn't really an indication of why that would happen. The usage has been the same as it's been pretty much all year between these 2 guys. CJ Mosley, I mean, he was placed on IR, so, Sherwood managers no longer need to worry about that possibility. We could just kind of continue to start him comfortably. But like I said, Jamie and Sherwood was the tackle vacuum this week. Quincy Williams was left picking up the crumbs, and there were only, I think, 2 of them, 2 tackles for Quincy Williams. So weird week, man, weird week. Okay, let's keep going with safeties here. And I want to highlight Josh Metellus of the Minnesota Vikings next, because I talked about Metellus's increased role in the box on the preview show this week. And for those who missed it, the reason for that increased usage in the box is because Ivan Pace is out. So the Vikings are relying on Metellus to handle more of those linebacker snaps, more so than Cam Grugier-Hill, who only played 24% of snaps as the, I guess, orthodox LB2. And for the second week in a row, Metellus is in the box for essentially half of his defensive snaps and had another nice little week. He didn't hit the double-digit tackles that he did last week, but he still managed to tie for the team lead in total tackles with 7, and then he added a pick in there as well. So mentioned it on the preview show as well, how I think there's reason to value him in that top 12-ish range for safeties the rest of the way for IDP, just because of that box-heavy role and really operating as the LB2 in a way, since Ivan Pace isn't expected back at this point in the season. He's on injured reserve. So yeah, I continue to like Metellus in that range right now because the usage is better than what it was earlier this season, where he wasn't really delivering strong production. But these past 2 weeks now have been encouraging as his strong production has coincided with his move to more snaps in the box. Okay, lastly, I wanted to highlight the Steelers edge defenders again in this one, because Alex Highsmith was returning from a 3-game absence, and Nick Herbig had been playing really well in his place. So I personally was curious to see if they'd give Herbig a little more playing time, since he's seemingly earned it. And he owns a 91.0 PFF grade and a 93.4 pass rush grade coming into this week, which are elite marks. And he, he actually did get more work than usual, even with Highsmith in the lineup. So Highsmith ended up playing 58% of snaps, as Herbig ended up playing 43% of snaps. So for context, Highsmith's average snap rate this season, when he's been in the lineup, has been 79%. It was 81% last year. So 79% down to 58%, 21% drop off is a pretty big drop off. As they found a way to kind of work Herbig in there a little bit more, and maybe part of it is just taking it easy on Highsmith coming off injury, since this is his second multi-week absence of the year. But again, Herbig has played really well, so it makes sense that they just give him more work. And look, 43% of snaps for Herbig, it's not great for him, but better than usual with Highsmith in the lineup. And as for Highsmith, like, even though he landed a sack in this one, probably gets, I'd say, a slight downgrade the rest of the way if we're assuming this usage sticks. We'll know more next week. But, a big part of the appeal with Highsmith was not just as a high-end pass rusher, but the heavy workload as well. So this isn't necessarily ideal, but it's not like it's a death blow to Highsmith's value either. Just takes away maybe some of his appeal is all. He continues to remain one of the better pass rushers in the league, and has that sack potential, but maybe doesn't get as many opportunities to do it right now as they continue to work Herbig in there as well. All right, that is going to do it for me this week, and our main IDP takeaways. Be sure to check out the IDP fantasy report. Like I said, we'll have everything else in there that maybe I didn't cover today. That'll be out Tuesday afternoon. Like I said, I'll try to remember to pin that in the comment section once the article drops. And then Thursday morning, as always, I'll be going game by game in the IDP Start Sit show, and we'll cover plenty in there as well. So thank you all for tuning in. If you'd be so kind to like and subscribe to the channel, I greatly appreciate it. Or leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It helps us a ton. So thank you again for those of you that have been doing that already. I really do appreciate it. And also a big shout out to the PFF data collection team. As always, huge shout out to them, because they are the best data team in the multiverse. And then for you guys, as always, feel free to ask questions in the comments. And until next time, peace out.